This is our PSA Dagger frame. I'm in the Handgun Specialist program for Sonora Desert Institute, commonly called SDI. This is the class's FTH 212. So I put this pistol together for the class. Was running into having a dead trigger field. Pull the trigger and there's just nothing. This trigger was mushy. I was like, God, this trigger's just god awful. Like, what is PSA doing? Like, I've built some of your ARs, I've had no issues. Like, this gun is completely, absolutely garbage. So I went to disassemble it. My slide wouldn't come off. So I ended up having to pull the striker plate out of the rear of the slide, pull the striker out, slide would slide forward. So, okay, so it tells me something is interfering with the striker. So I take it apart, slowly start going looking at part by part, how the fitment, how everything works, running through cycle operations, and I was determined that my trigger housing, which is right here in black, it's a plastic piece. There's a gap, you know, so I can stick my screwdriver down in this gap between the trigger housing and the connector. This part right here is what's commonly referred to as a crucifix, because it's in a cross shape or a lowercase t, depending on how you want to call it for you atheist. And right here, what we call the trigger bar. Trigger bar and crucifix are attached. Connector's its own piece that slides into the trigger housing. So if we go and we look at our schematics of the firearm, this is the connector. This is your trigger housing. Here's your trigger bar. There's the crucifix component. So notice how this has a little leg on it. It slides into your trigger housing. Well, there was a bunch of plastic debris down there from when they machined it, cut it, molded it, how they build this plastic housing. It was partially causing that top to seat all the way inward. Now, it was one issue on its own. The second issue was your riser here is supposed to actually have kind of an outward bend to it, pointing to the right side of the firearm. And that's why you want that gap between your trigger housing and your connector, which is the gap that I was just showing y'all where I can slide my screwdriver down into. So what was going on is the crucifix was not dropping out of the way for that firearm, for the striker components of the firearm, for that slide to come off. So on a Glock disassembly, the trigger has to be to the rear, which it currently is. If you notice, oh, all right, I don't have all the fancy GoPros. I'm using the kickstand on my phone and the slide, as you can see, off this firearm to show this. So as you can see right now, the crucifix right here is actually in the downward position. So we go and just manually pull, we reset the trigger. Notice how the crucifix is up now. So what's happening is the trigger was, I could pull it, but the crucifix was not dropping downward. So it was allowing that sear to be hung up. As we go forward, that sear was catching, and he couldn't go forward to remove the slide. Even if I held the trigger to the rear, the crucifix was still staying up. That was because the connector didn't have that outward bend. So as you can look with the trigger to the rear, the connector actually captures part of your trigger bar off of this angle and allows that crucifix to stay to the bottom. So once I pull that connector, bend it out just a little bit, enough to where it would hold, put the slide on. I didn't put any of my pins in, held the slide in my hand, cocked it, trigger fell forward. It's okay, perfect. The striker fell forward. I cocked the slide, triggered, reset. We're good to go. So I got the pins in. You can see partially. I haven't put them across to where they're even on both sides, but I wanted to get them in there to hold everything where it needs to be. Ran through some functions tests. The firearm is now functioning correctly. So Glocks, if you search Glock slide won't come off, you're going to see tons of stuff on YouTube, but nobody really breaks down and shows you what is causing it, why, and what to fix it. A lot of time it's people say, oh, it's someone installing the slide wrong. This is firearms have been firing. They clean it. They go to put it on. They have issues. Well, this was because of poor quality parts. I'm going to send an email to PSA about it, let them know what was done to fix it, and to see what they have to say. That way, if there's a quality issue, they can address this. If you have any questions, you have any comments, anything insight on it, let me know. Definitely looking at putting a different trigger in this gun, as well as a threaded barrel, because I already have a suppressor. Overall, not terrible pistol. one of my roll pin up here, as you can see, maybe on camera, that roll pin's full. There was a bunch of plastic millings in here that roll pin caught on the initial install. Yeah, as you can see here, it's open. On this side, it's not, versus this one. If you look at it just right, you can see daylight, but you can see plastic inside of it as well. So the fit and finish these daggers, you're getting what you're paying for. The holes could be cleaned out a little better from the factory, but overall, if your slide won't come off, you have a mushy, dead trigger, won't release the striker, look back here. In order to get the slide off, all you need to do, pull the slider rear, pull your back striker plate off right here, and it will then let the slide come forward, and you can address the components you need to. You got any questions? Let me know.